Did you know that we have Aviation Week to thank for the strict security at the B-21 Raiders unveiling earlier this month? You see, the B-21 was rolled out of Northrop Grumman's Palmdale, California plant, the very same plant they used to unveil the B-2 Spirit way back in 1988. In fact, the two unveiling ceremonies were pretty similar. But back in 1988, the world was very different. The Cold War hadn't ended yet, and the B-2 Spirit was most of the world's first glimpse at a stealth aircraft. The US Air Force had just acknowledged the existence of the F-117, but they wouldn't reveal it officially until April of 1990. So when Northrop announced that they'd be rolling their new stealth bomber out of their Palmdale plant on November 22nd of 1988, everyone took notice. The folks at Aviation Week were psyched to get an invite. Just like at the B-21's unveiling, they were very hard to come by. But just like all the other journalists in attendance, they were told that they'd be corralled into stadium seating 200 feet away from the bomber and facing it head on. That was the only view you would get. But one of Aviation Week's editors, a guy named Michael Dornheim, saw a problem with this. He knew that if they rolled the B-2 all the way out of the hangar, they might only get to see it from the front, but Russia, with their spy satellites overhead, would almost certainly get a full view. And he figured, if Gorbachev and his buddies get to see this whole bomber, why can't the rest of us? So, when the day finally came to roll the B-2 Spirit out of the hangar, Aviation Week's William Scott was there in attendance, sitting in that stadium seating, corralled by security and facing the bomber head-on. But as it rolled out of the hangar, he heard the faint drone of a Cessna 172 circling overhead, and he knew exactly what was going on. Michael Dornheim had rented the Cessna and hired a photographer, and they were circling above the hangar bay, even though the Air Force had a UH-1 Iroquois, a Huey, with a door gunner circling below them for security. It seemed as though nobody noticed. In fact, Dornheim even recorded every interaction he had with air traffic control, because he assumed he'd be arrested as soon as he landed, and he'd need to defend himself in court. But to their surprise, no one stopped them. After the event, they rushed the film to Aviation Week's headquarters for their deadline the following day. And the following week, they rolled their magazine out with the only full bomber shots of the B-2 Spirit available to anyone in the world outside of some intelligence agencies and the firms who were responsible for the aircraft itself. The following week, Scott got a call from a colonel in the Air Force, and he thought it was pretty funny, but he needed to know. How did they secure those incredible photographs of the B-2 when no one else had gotten to see anything but the front? Scott explained what Dornheim had done, and although that colonel got a chuckle, he did relay that most of the civilian officials were pretty mad and, quote, heads were gonna roll. Fast forward 33 years later, and the B-21 was rolled out of that same Palmdale facility, but with a few notable differences. Number one, the aircraft did not emerge all the way from the hangar. Number two, they did the event at night. And number three, there were no aircraft circling overhead this time.